Today, I'm speaking with Ira Wolfe about the future of work. We're going to talk about his own career and changing careers in the middle of your life and following your passion. And also, we're going to talk about growth mindset and adaptability, which are two characteristics that are needed for the future of work. Enjoy the conversation with Ira. Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Business of Meaning podcast. And today, I'm speaking with a legend in the speaking industry, Hall of Fame speaker, TEDx speaker. We're going to talk about the future of work. We're going to talk about adaptability. We're going to talk about Googleization. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ira Wolfe. Ira, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
It's a pleasure, Eric. Thanks so much for having me.
You know, I've heard so much about you and we were able to finally set this date today. You have had an amazing career, or should I say, you have had multiple amazing careers before, getting in now to the speaking industry. What is your story?
Yeah, happy to share that. So I definitely have is now a very common pathway or life career. But I started out as a dentist. That was my ambition since I was in elementary school, and my fifth grade teacher went around the room. My last name's a W, so I'm near the end, and I got to hear 25 classmates talk about what they wanted to be when they grow up. And I don't actually know why I said I wanted to be a dentist. Said I wasn't in my family. Nobody was a dentist, and I didn't like going to the dentist. But somewhere I decided I was going to be a dentist, and so I stuck with that through high school, through college, through dental school, through a residency, through public health service. Opened a practice in what was at that time a very unstable economic time. Did very, very well. And as I said in my TED Talk a few years later, I loved everything about dentistry but dentistry.
Ouch.
So I loved the business. I loved the marketing. I loved working with the people. I loved the leadership. I loved the lifestyle. I loved helping other people overcome their fears. I loved the customer service aspect. I grew up in a family of retailers. So you learn, that was sort of ingrained in me. I always talked about the Matlow gene. That we were all marketers and retailers. So I loved that aspect. But the bottom line, I didn't like the drilling and filling and many other things.
Right.
So I left. I wasn't even at the height of I was at the height of a career, but I had many, many years left and could have coasted through. But as today, that many people are shifting careers and looking for meaningful work and re-evaluating and readjusting their priorities. I did that 30 some years ago. That in some sense became my business, although it took a long time for the world to catch up that there was a need for that.
No, but by the way, we have a common point. I don't like the drilling either.
I like the drilling. I just
my mom
was just routine. It really was more the routine. And I had a very varied career because in addition to having a general practice, I mean, I did kids, I did adults, but I did a lot of the subspecialties through my training. So, we did all the things people hate, like root canals, but we did crowns and I did children. Yeah. So I had a very diverse, and then I had a good friend who was an oral surgeon and I was hospital trained. I had a hospital residency and he did these major jaw surgeries. I don't want to get too detailed on it, but it'll gross people out. But, helping people who had deformed jaws, malalignments. And so I did about 800. I assisted him on about 800 major jaw surgeries.
Wow.
Literally just rearranging people's where their jaw was in their head.
Yeah.
And so we helped, a lot of people. So it was very diverse. It was very different than the traditional go to work, take off Wednesdays or Thursdays, play golf a couple days a week.
Not too bad.
Yeah, I actually, it got to the end just to share how I loved everything about dentistry, but dentistry. I learned that I was in a situation where I can keep cutting back. I was burnt out. There was no question that I was burnt out, which again became today, 30 years later, is, you're okay to talk about it. Back then was, what's wrong with you? I mean, you have a great living, you've got nice homes, you got nice cars, you have all this stuff. But I essentially I picked up golf, which I found out I didn't really like, but it became my diversion and distraction. I was playing golf. I was playing 5 rounds a week. Now, given this is in Northeast Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow.
So this wasn't year round, but I was still playing 5. I had a club in my hand every single day, every chance I got. It was my distraction. Cut my hours in half. I was working about 20 hours a week, still making good literally living on the golf course. And then found that wasn't, what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And that wasn't my why. It wasn't my purpose. At the end of the day, it wasn't very meaningful to be able to do that. Although I was helping people, I just didn't like how I was doing it. So I found a better way that I can live my life, enjoy what I'm doing, and also reach a lot of other people. And there were dentists who loved treating people. They loved the drilling. Yep. and doing
whatever. Oh, absolutely. My mom was a dentist all her life, an orthodontist, and she loved the children, and she loved her patients, and she loved helping them, except one. She hated me in terms of being in the chair.
Family's always
so she would make sure that I had an appointment at 10 p.m. that nobody can hear me screaming, but that's another story. So you've been very successful in that life, and you decide that it's not what you want to be doing. Then what do you decide to do when you grow up? So what did you change into, and how did that happen?
Well, the low-hanging fruit was obviously helping other dentists. I mean, because I had a successful practice. We had one of the largest practices in the community. And again, I did the things that most dentists hated doing was, marketing, creating content, doing good customer service, managing their staff, hiring the right people, doing all that stuff. And so I started a business, and it was called Business in Practice, putting business in practice. And my idea was to help dentists, physicians, accountants, attorneys, engineers, professionals put business in practice, because they were technically trained. They all learned. They're all technicians to a degree. And oftentimes we heard this comment: if it wasn't for the people, I'd love what I did, or if it wasn't for the patients, I'd love what I did, or if it wasn't for my staff. And I had the complete opposite. I wanted to do the opposite of what they did. I said, how can I help them? Because that's what I was good at. So I started this business in practice. And after the first year, I was really pretty successful out of the gate. I had 15 different dentists, 12 different practices, accountant, an attorney, and an engineering firm, all I hooked up with. In the end of the year, I pretty much fired them all. I fired them. And because they really wanted me just to do the work, they wanted to make their pain go away, but not change their behavior. And I couldn't do that. I didn't own the company. I could advise them. I can coach them. I can counsel them. I can tell them how I did it. But they had to have it in their heart. They had to treat people better and do what they did. So I basically fired them and rebooted the company as Success Performance Solution. But the one thing that I found that I really, really loved, and maybe it goes back to my need to find solutions, but identify problems and find solutions, was the employee assessments in general. It's like, whether people, they weren't technically psychological tests, but people put them in that category. So things like Myers-Briggs and DISC and other personality tools. I loved that part. And that's what I loved. I did love that part about dentistry. I loved the diagnosis. I enjoyed outside of medicine, it's critical thinking skills. It's being presented with the problem that no one else can seem to figure it out. And a patient comes in and says, I've been to 5 doctors, they're giving me medicines and they're doing this, but I still have this pain, but they said, maybe you can help. And it really is differential diagnosis, which is critical thinking. The only thing I do now is I don't get insurance for it. People have to pay, cash or check or credit cards for what I do. But I love that part. But it was really the diagnosis part. Even as a dentist, which was really odd, because I was always passionate about leadership. I always participated. I always took a lot of the personality tests, going back to, I won't say in dental school, because I don't think they taught us that in dental school, but along the way, I took a lot of management courses, a lot of leadership courses. And I always found those interesting. But then, like everybody else, you took it and then you put it up on the shelf.
Yeah, right.
But, I always learned something about myself. So I really thought that was a direction. And I ended up my office ended up in a sales training office. I shared space with them. And I walked in, and on the shelf was this disc notebooks. And I said, "Oh, you do disc?" And I actually had done that in my office because I brought in a partner. We had very different personalities. We were trying to figure out how to get everybody to work, what our different styles. It wasn't that we didn't like one another. We just approached life differently. And I talk about the 4 Ps. We talk about problems. Is you can narrow down all the world's problems into essentially these 4 things: problems, people, pace, and procedures. Okay. And it's how people approach it. So some people go head on into a problem, and other people sit back and observe. Some people are love interacting and chatting and leading people, and other people are more introverted and can step back. So it doesn't mean we're good or bad people. It doesn't even mean we're good at it. But it's a language we speak, just as I know you're fluent in French. And, but I did take 5 years of French, but wasn't very good in conversational French. Grammatical French I'm good at, but conversational I'm not. But if all of a sudden you went into French, or I started to speak Russian or German or Ukrainian, it would be a very difficult conversation. And that's how our team was. We had 16 people on their team, 2 providers, very different personalities.
And so with those personality tests, you were able to bring the whole team together.
We were able to kind of align it and figure out that, hey, you're not doing that on purpose. That's just your approach. So I was fascinated by that, and that led into my business. So Success Performance Solutions really became an employee assessment business, and I built a reputation and a brand and a thought leadership really around that. But like many other people, is they the one-trick ponies. It's like Myers-Briggs, DISC, any other tool that's out there, and there's a long list of them, doesn't solve the world's problems. We're complicated human beings. So I integrated a number of tools, developed my expertise around that, and actually sold that business last July.
Congratulations. And now you've been now speaking and very much speaking on the future of work.
Yeah, so the involvement of that was, as I said a couple minutes ago, I loved content creation, loved the marketing. Talking about assessments is boring. Really. You go to people, managers want to know what their employees are, but nobody else really likes to take an assessment and find out who they are, what they do. So I found that creating my brand, building my thought leadership was really around talking about the context in which we need that and what was the future of work going to be like. In the late 90s, we were in a time similar today. The economy was booming, but it was dysfunctional. And we were at that .com technological bubble that we were about to have, the .com bust, but it was pretty robust. But we were at a time when there was we started to have skill shortages for the first time in our history. Because Gen X was coming into the workplace, they're a smaller population, different attitudes in place, and the millennials came in. So I started to talk about something called the perfect labor storm. And it really became, again, my brand, and it was much more fun to talk about than assessments. And it says, here's the world we're going to live in. Here's what the marketplace is going to look like. Here's why employers need to change, because the employees are going to change. We have new generations coming in, that old mindset. Our grandparents' mindset was going to be different. And so I ended up speaking about a perfect labor storm. I wrote 2 books on the perfect labor storm that evolved into talking about the 4 generations, which was Geeks, Geezers, and Googlization. So through my 25 years that I had Success Performance Solutions, I became more of a thought leader on the future of work. And it was always in the future. People kept putting it off. And it's like, well, we're not there yet. And then 2020 hit overnight. It was like, oh, we have this labor market problem. We have a supply and demand problem. People are still talking about the millennials. By the way, I'm a recovering millennial basher.
Yeah.
In the 80s, or in like 2008, 2009, when I wrote the book, I was pretty harsh on millennials. But the reality is that the millennials now are in their mid 40s. And they're the people bashing the young people. By the way,
no, but I've read recently. I'm reading this book called "The End of the World is Just the Beginning," and it's very interesting. They're looking at demographics, and basically what they're saying is that the U.S. is probably the only country in the world that still have enough of younger people to get into the marketplace. But China is going to, in 15 years, I think they're going to have like 900 million people instead of a billion, whatever they have today. Europe is declining. There's no replacement. In terms of future of work, what can you tell us? If somebody's listening and has a business, what should they think about in terms of future of work and in terms of the team that they're going to have?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's really where I spend, much of my time today. And I just created a video on it. If you go up to my YouTube channel, there's a video on this. So it's 2 minutes, and very quickly you'll get the snapshot. So I'll try to do it in that short period of time. The reality is that the bar is very low when you bring up China, Russia, a lot of the other countries, Europe, Italy. Their birth rate is extremely low. It's been low. And yes, they are having some huge socioeconomic challenges, societal problems, because they just don't have enough young people to support the global population. So that's a given. So the bar is really, really low when you say the US is better, because our birth rate is 1.6 and declining. So let me throw out some stats for you. Okay. And this is what this video does, is between the period of 1950-ish to 1970, let's say 80, there were 2 to 2.5 million new workers coming into the workplace every year in the US. Okay. A lot of people. And our economy was growing and women were coming into the workplace. So we had this abundant supply of people coming into the workplace. And then we took a dip in the late 80s, early 90s with Gen X, because Gen X, and by the way, just this reference point, Gen X was born between 1965 and 1980, early 80s. And so they came in the workplace, but there was only half as many Gen X. But it didn't really matter, because the baby boomers were still flooding the market. The baby boomer females were still flooding the market. So we were good. And then the millennials came on. And the millennials in the late 90s and early 2000s were even a larger population. There was over the 2 to 2.5 million new people. So we still had the boomers in place. We had Gen X that are coming in, and then we have these millennials, lots of people. And then in 2010, we started to fall off the cliff, because we changed our immigration policy. Birth rates went down. Millennials, Gen X and millennials were having fewer children later in life. A whole lot. Currently, we have 500,000 new natural-born workers coming into the workplace every year, down from 2 to 2.5 million. By 2025, that goes down to 200,000 at the current rate, because we removed immigration. Our immigration policies are atrocious. It's a political quagmire. That's not going to change. So we removed our immigration, or a large volume. We still have immigration, but a large volume of immigration of workers.
Yeah.
And also, when you look at this graph, for anybody, if you're watching it, if you're listening, you won't see it, but imagine that it just falls off the cliff. And at the same time, we're losing a portion of the labor market with the aging baby boomers.
Yeah, I think there's like 10,000 retiring every day in the US.
Yeah. Oh, it's more. Yeah. Well, it may even be higher now. I haven't seen the stat, but because of COVID, a lot took early retirement, a lot passed away, a lot are not able to work, and everybody's older. So the reality is, we may have more young people than these other countries, other developed countries.
Yeah,
have a fraction. We have a fraction of what's needed, and automation will help a little bit. So this fear of AI and technology throwing people out of jobs, the people who will get thrown out of jobs are people who don't want to learn new skills and reskill and upskill. And it's not, I'm not saying that everybody has to go back to college, because that's a whole other, that's a whole other day. We can have a conversation about that. We're just talking about the skills that are required today. And the fact of the matter is, what we used to call blue collar skills are in the highest demand, and technology skills and people in the trades. And those jobs aren't going to be easily replaced in the near future by automation and robots. We're still going to need plumbers, we're going to need carpenters, we're going to need electricians, we're going to need welders. They're still in high demand. Now, that doesn't mean you don't need an education. The fact that everybody doesn't need a 4-year college degree doesn't mean they don't need an education.
So if I follow you well, Ira, we have a declining population. Although a little bit better than the rest of the world, but still
growing population. Our overall population is growing, because we're living longer, and all the baby boomers
working population.
Our working age population is at an all-time low.
I get it. So that is also, so immigration is one of the reason. Automation will compensate a part of it, but obviously not all of it. So, and you're talking 25 is tomorrow. It's in 2 years.
Yeah.
So if I'm a business,
what we had currently, we have 1/5 of the new blood that would come into the workplace every year than what we had 20 years ago.
What type of future of work do you see now? Are boomers or retired people going to come back to work? Or what's going to happen?
Well, many of them can't. I mean, so there's a couple of problems. So there are some boomers that will come back to work because they have to, or some maybe because they want to, many because they have to. They just haven't saved enough and are living longer. But they don't have the skills. They don't have the stamina. I mean, they can't fill many of the jobs that are required. There's a lot of the jobs that are required are either going to be technology skills or they're going to be somewhat manual, or they're just not going to have the physical stamina, be able to do it. And as an older baby boomer, I can speak out of line, and I'm in pretty good shape. And I do a Stairmaster 45 minutes to 60 minutes every day, but it's still harder for me to do certain things. So I can't go back even if I wanted to do some of the things that I used to do. We've got a problem. I mean, it's going to come through, which is what your show's about, what we talk about. It's got to come through better leadership, better management, better productivity, not only being more efficient, but being more effective. And they are vastly different. We've lived in a world that focused on efficiency, not effectiveness. And so we need to work on that. And then we have a generation that says, I don't work to live. I don't live to work.
Yeah.
I work to live.
Yeah.
And so in addition to that shrinking working population, nobody's saying, I'm willing to do 90 to 100 hours a week of work, give up my family, not see my children grow, and basically count the days until retirement. And so that's even siphoning off more people. And then we can go in the whole thing because the perfect labor storm. We talk about the lack of people who want to go back to work can't because there's no caregivers. They need insurance.
Concretely speaking, we have, okay, you say you need more leadership. I get it, but it's not going to compensate all the needs, even if you have efficient leadership. So what are we looking at in the next?
We live in a partisan world, and I don't want to make this political, but we live in a very partisan world. The only immediate solution, and nearly every economist and every business leader agrees on this, is that we need a different immigration policy. It's because in addition, we talked about Europe and Asia, of some of those countries. Africa is the opposite. There's a lot of people, and there's a lot of people who are willing to come and do many of the jobs that need to be done. And I don't want to say at lower wages because we can't go into the slavery, low wage, take advantage of people's system. But there's people that are capable of doing the work. But so part of it's immigration. Part of it is there is an entitlement. I mean, I just heard this the other day. I mean, this is obscene. And somebody just they were talking about that, I don't get it. I'm not like you, and they're 25 years younger than me. They thought I was much younger, but they said, you're 20, but I'm not like you. I'm not smart enough. I can't do this, but I'm just hanging in there. I only have 12 more years until I retire.
Oh my goodness. So sad.
But that's not like, oh, wow. That's the first time I've heard anybody say that. I hear it all the time. So and they think everybody else is entitled. It's like, so you're telling me that you're going to retire in your mid 50s, live maybe to your 70, 80 or 90 on a retirement plan, not be productive because you've put your time in. I don't have an easy answer. I mean, and it's a struggle because we work with people that are trying to do this, and we work primarily with employers who are, so my message to employers is you need to change your leadership. You need to change your attitude. You need to change, we have our own podcast. Last week, we talked about mattering at work. How do you help people feel like everybody wants to feel significant. How do you help people feel like they matter? Today, we were talking about mental health issues. How do we help it? Mental health is not, you can't put people in a closet and send them away to a crazy farm. I mean, is we need to look very, very differently at how we treat people to take care of them, not burn them out, treat people as human beings. And there's a huge opportunity for companies that do that, because the supply, the supply is of people, of qualified people, of skilled people, is going to shrink for the next 15 years. And even with immigration, which not seeing that as a big fix on the short term, is going to be slow. It's not going to fill all the gaps. So when we talk about a supply chain problem, we've got a supply chain problem, but all the factories shut down.
Yeah. So if I hear you well, major challenges for employers in the future, major opportunities for employees or people that are working because they're be needed. So in conclusion for this podcast today, what would you advise somebody's listening today that is in their career in the meetings and event industry? What would you advise them to focus on? Give us 2 or 3 recommendations to not only be employable, but to prepare yourself for what's coming in the workplace.
Yeah, and by the way, I know it sounds dystopian and fear and terrifying and all this, but I'm actually hopeful. I actually see a better future, because I also see that we're technology and change, that we're not going to be suffering from. We're going to find cures for cancer and Parkinson's and lots of things, and that hopefully we can enjoy life rather than working to pay our medical bills. So I can see some things that are very different. So I know why we're going down this very dark hole, and I don't want to leave it at that. But I think there's a few universal things, and I had to learn this too. One is having a growth mindset, which is different than an open mindset. Is recognize that we need to see these challenges of what can I learn differently, not be so afraid of learning new skills, not feeling I'm too old, I'm not smart enough, I'm in the wrong place. There's a quick exercise that we do, is say, when somebody says I can't do this, is end it with yet. Is I'm not smart enough yet. I'm not very good with technology yet. I'm too old to do this. Maybe that's not a yet, but and then figure out what you're going to do. So one is growth mindset, but the other one is, and this is sort of the superpower of human beings, and this is what will differentiate, is being adaptable. And growth mindset's part of that. In order to be adaptable, you have to have a growth mindset. But McKinsey, Deloitte, Boston College, or Boston Consulting Group,
Bain,
World Economic Forum, they've all identified one skill that everybody will need in the future, and that is
adaptability.
And part of that is being more resilient, more gritty, growth mindset, having mentally agile, cognitive agility, and a very interesting one. And this may be the key. This may be the differentiator, is to be adaptable. We don't just learn; we need to unlearn. And we need to stop doing what's not very effective anymore. And just because we did it for 20 or 25 years and we're really, really good at it and we love it, sometimes you got to just stop doing it.
Absolutely.
And so I would say, do what you can to develop a growth mindset, and definitely build your adaptability powers. And that's vague, but I don't know. Tomorrow just is going to be way different than today, and the next day is going to be different than tomorrow, and it's just going to continue on. And I said, as an older baby boomer, I should just be sitting back and relaxing and living on my retirement. I keep going because I see a better future, and I want to be part of it and be more productive. So you're never too old to do it.
That's awesome. Ira, thank you very much. Growth mindset, adaptability. My last question, how could people get in touch with you?
Well, 2 easy ways. One is you can go up to my website, irawolfe.com, or I'm very, very active in LinkedIn. You'll always find me hanging out there many hours, posting things, and I share a lot of content. But on either of those, and also our podcast, Geeks, Geezers, and Googleization, we do we do a weekly podcast or more, and we talk about this stuff every week.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ira, thank you so much for sharing those insights with me. Growth, mindset, adaptability, absolutely very important. That resonates a lot with me, and I'm sure with everyone listening. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to connect with me, please do so on LinkedIn or join the Facebook group eventbusinessformula.com/group. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please share it with your network. Thank you. Bye-bye.